But you have to look at what's happened in this country, and I won't talk specifically on the country. Let's go to California. There's 250,000 people leaving this state every year. This is the first time I can recall that in reapportionment we didn't pick up a seat because for some reason the state elected officials believe that there's this bubble over California and you have your own environment. You know, you can't produce fertilizer here. You can't quarry sand and gravel. You can't quarry cement. And many other things you can't quarry, so you have to bring them in from Arizona and Nevada because restrictions and regulations have become so onerous in California that businesses are leaving. And the surprising number of the people leaving, it's not just those of you who are supposedly rich, it's the middle class leaving. Because the writing is kind of on the wall that you cannot continue to accrue the debt you're accruing in California, place some mandates on the private sector, and expect this state to continue to flourish in the future. And I say, it's impossible for you to be pro-labor if you're not pro-business. I said, because when you create an environment, all you can do in government is create an environment to give people an opportunity to succeed. If you create an environment where businesses do well, they hire people, pay better wages, better benefits, and people, God forbid, usually work more than 40 hours a week. And when you regulate the private sector to death, we have a situation like that today. People get laid off, they work part-time, they give up some of their pay, benefits are cut, and they're just not doing well. So you can't tell me you're pro-labor if you're not pro-business. But I don't believe the government should try to put you out of business at the same time. And any mandate or regulation is a de facto tax because it costs an individual money. The average small business under 20 people in this country pays $10,000 per year for every employee just based on government mandates. And that has to change. Now, you've heard about the fiscal cliff, and we're going to talk about transportation in a moment, but it impacts every one of you in this room. There's a debate going on in this country that if you're making about $250,000 a year, you're not paying your fair share. And we have to go back to 2003 and 2001 and say, what did we do in the previous tax cuts? The 15% bracket went down to 10, the 39.6 bracket went down to 35. The largest cuts in income tax were at the low income and the moderate income level. And what nobody wants to face is that 6.5 million families were taken off the tax rolls from the federal government. And when you hear this number out there that half the people in this country pay no federal income tax, that's true. They do pay Medicare and they pay Social Security, but they pay no federal income tax. When we changed the tax codes in 2001, 2003, like I said, we took 6.5 million people off the tax rolls because we raised the income level up high enough that they didn't earn enough to pay federal income tax. But there's a fiscal cliff coming in January 1st. And Bernanke, who's the Federal Reserve Chairman, probably the best authority on the Great Depression that you'll find out there, and wrote more, I think he wrote his thesis on it when he got his doctorate. And he says, if you raise taxes, at the same time we're cutting $1.2 trillion worth of spending cuts in the next 10 years, the recession will be worse than what occurred in 2008. So when you're getting ready to vote this year, I want you to listen to the rhetoric on both sides. One side says we cannot raise taxes. We need to allow the private sector to grow and stimulate. We need what we can to try to help the private sector create jobs. Another side is saying we need to raise taxes and we'll consider cutting at the same time. So when you hear the rhetoric, listen to Bernanke. There's nobody who's a better authority in the financial services sector than him. He's saying if you do that now, you're going to lead to an immediate recession. You can't avoid it. So when you vote this year, I suggest you do one thing. You vote your life. And I'm not saying pro-life, pro-choice. You vote your life. And you think about yourself. What do you want? How do you think life should be for you and your family? And you better vote it. Because the consequences of continuing to go the direction we're going are rather scary. We have $16 trillion in debt out there that I can't pay, you can't pay, your kids and grandchildren are going to have a difficult time paying it. Nobody wants to face the debate over Social Security. You've heard the rhetoric, and everybody keeps trying to scare seniors. There's never been a proposal on Social Security that impacted anybody under 55 years of age. But the reality is in 20 years, there's going to be 2 people working for every 1 person retired. Now, your business people, add the math up. Local taxes, county taxes, state taxes, federal taxes, Medicare, Social Security. 2 of our grandkids cannot pay our Social Security. Medicare is in the red and upside down in 10 years. So how do we continue going the direction we're going without some kind of a change in this country? You know, we propose some tax cuts we think need to be implemented with, we're going to take some write-offs away at the same time, but to bring the tax code down. But you have to say, how do we cut spending in this country? You go back to like 2008 spending levels. That was pre-recession, pre-stimulus, and you say, take those levels, flatline them, don't include the military. There's certain things you can't include. Social Security, Medicare are off there to begin with. And as the economy starts to grow, it will surpass the spending levels, creating surpluses, starting to pay down the debt. But you have to cap those spending levels at the same time. You can't just allow it to continue growing like we have in the past, the spending without dealing with something on the revenue side. And it's not that you're not paying enough taxes, you are paying enough taxes. If you're a corporation, you pay the highest tax rates in the world. So if we're going to be globally competitive and we really want to bring businesses back to this country, why would we charge businesses the highest tax code and tax rate in the world? In 2005, TLU came out. That was the bill we changed things. I authored language that allowed a pilot program for breaking down barriers. It said, the language I put in said, any state that has federal regulations on their environmental quality standards that meets federal regulations, you don't have to go through both. And only one state took advantage of my program, that was California. And California right now is saving 17 months on process time and 30 months on delivery time of your projects. Because before we had to go through an environmental process in California through CEQA, then when it was finished we had to send it to federal government for NEPA, and then it had to come back and start the process. In the new bill we just passed out, I made that part of the law for every state in the nation now. Any state can do the same thing. It also says that if you apply for a federal grant and it's authorized, you don't have to wait for the grant money to come back to the state to start the project. You can backfill those with county money, state money, start the project, and when your dollars come in from the federal government, replace it with your general fund monies. So two major things have occurred in the law, plus I set guidelines on how long it took for the government to respond. When you make the application, government has to respond at a given date. If they don't, they have to tell you why they didn't, and they have to prove it in a legal fashion. So we've tried to make it more difficult for government to delay your projects. We've tried to make it easier for you to build projects in this country. The best thing we can do is build roads, highways, and let the construction industry go back to work. This state in particular will not come out of this recession until we stimulate the building industry, period. Whether it's houses, roads, bridges, commercial, industrial, we have to do it because the bulk of the jobs we've lost in California and this nation are in those sectors. And yet you see a lot of people out there talking about Freddie and Fannie. Now, Freddie and Fannie doesn't really impact you directly unless you're a home builder. But you've heard these horrible things about Freddie and Fannie out there. Freddie and Fannie's default rate is 3.58%. Now, that includes all their mortgage-backed securities and everything. The private sector mortgage-backed securities default rate is 19.88%. And if you go to your local bank, their default rate today is greater than Freddie and Fannie's. But nobody wants to tell the people that story because it's too easy to blame a government-sponsored industry for something that went wrong. Now, did they go do something wrong? Yeah, they should never have gone public. The purpose of Freddie and Fannie was to provide liquidity during difficult times so the housing market could be stable and the construction industry could be stable. But when they became public in about 2002, when you had countrywide groups like that, basically taking predatory loans and bundling them together, they started competing for those loans so they could sell mortgage-backed securities, and they bought loans they should not have bought. And in the process, lost a tremendous amount of money. But the government's done everything we can to put them under. When we lent money to the banks in 2008, we charged them 5% interest. And on the first half of TARP, people said, well, you didn't need to lend the banks money. Wrong. In one 24-hour period, $500 billion was withdrawn from the money market system. $500 billion. They were selling assets for fire sale prices. You had gold spike the largest amount in 24 hours you ever had it spike. The problem was there was not one bank in the country that could withstand a run. Not Wells Fargo, not Bank of America, not one. And the American people did not trust their bank. They were taking money out of it and putting it into 90-day Treasury notes for almost 0% interest. And what we did, we said we're going to insure your deposits, we're going to put money into the banking industry, and people stopped drawing their money out of the banks. And we made $20 billion in the process and got all our money back. In fact, there's still some money owed us, and we still made $20 billion. We're charging Freddie and Fannie 10% interest on the money. They're lending it out for 3.6%. Do the math. You're charging them 10% in an economy where every dime they're making is going to the federal government in interest. So they can't be profitable. So the federal government's doing everything they can to make sure that they don't continue in the future. Now, you think this doesn't impact you. It does impact you. If we don't turn the housing market and the construction industry together as a collective body, this economy is not going to come back for our industry. So If highways and bridges need to be built, so does commercial, industrial, so does residential, because they're all intertwined. Because I know a lot of grading contractors now that do public works projects because they can't find anything to grade in this country. Iron's sitting just in the lots rusting. And then the old iron, it's illegal to use it now anyways, based on new laws. So you say, do we have to do something different in this country? We really do. We have to get back to basics. You cannot continue to mandate and regulate the private sector like we have. You've heard of Dodd-Frank, and you think, well, Dodd-Frank is a financial service sector. It doesn't impact me. It does impact you because it has a huge impact on the financial service sector, which are banks and money markets. And if money does not flow into the industry, you guys don't have jobs. The biggest debate we had over this last bill, which I absolutely oppose a 2-year bill, because you can't plan long-term projects in a 2-year bill, was we didn't have the liquidity. Now, in 2009, Chairman Oberstar of the Transportation Committee came in and we were going to propose a 6-year bill. You remember that one? We're going to have a press release at 1 o'clock in the afternoon to have Obama come in at 11 o'clock and say there will be no transportation bill because we just blew the money in the stimulus bill. Remember all those shovel-ready projects that we never built? You know, we spent $90 billion giving write-offs to renewable energies that none of us benefit from at all. And do I believe in renewable energies? Sure I do. But I can't power my car with a sail, so I've got a problem between now and then. And the reality is, we have the largest reserves of oil in the world, in the United States. We surpass Saudi Arabia and everybody else. We're just not using it. But if you look at the reserves we have in this country, they're enormous. Oil shale alone is over 2 trillion barrels. 2 trillion. Outer continental shelf, there's tremendous amount of oil. But when we came to California, we said you can only drill beyond 15 miles. You remember that one? Well, 15 miles out, there's the shelf that just drops vertically to such a depth, you can't drill out there. All our oil is within 50 miles. The Gulf, we've shut it down. China can drill out there, but we can't drill out there. You've heard of Anwar? Has anybody ever been to Anwar? There's nothing in Anwar except it's called oil weed. It's about 6 inches tall. And you rub your hands on it, you think, that's oily. Yeah, it's called oil weed because there's so much oil there. The state of Alaska wants to drill, and we won't let them drill because of federal land rights. You know, we've actually cut our federal permits in half on drilling in federal lands. And if you don't think this impacts your life and your business, you're wrong. It does. When people pay $4.80 a gallon for gas, they don't have much left for anything else. And when you look at what our future is, let's focus on what's right. Jobs in this country. I had a press interviewer and say, what's your 3 most important items? I said, jobs, jobs, jobs. He looked at me and said, well, there's got to be a 2 and 3. I said, there is no 2 and 3 if number 1 doesn't occur. If we don't put the American people back to work, nothing else is going to matter because the revenues will not be there to build freeways, highways. They won't be there for the things we need. We won't have the housing industry come back. People are struggling to pay the bills in their house. And you so-called rich people, your first mandate is you got to pay your expenses that associate with your home. You got to take your kids, your wife, your family, or if it's reversed, and your basic expenses. And anything above that is what you can put in your business. And that's what we're wanting to take. Because when you change your marginal income and your assets go down, it impacts the amount of money you can put back in your business. And when I talk to some of my friends on the other side, I say, who wants to work for somebody poor? Raise your hand. Because a poor guy can't make the payments, right? Can't write a paycheck. So do you expect somebody who's in a business to be poor? No, you want them to be successful. So let's get back to basics. You need to vote your life. And I mean that. And transportation is your life, and it's the lifeblood of this country. It is. People benefit from it from when they get up in the morning till they go to bed at night. And if you don't start fighting for your life, government's going to take it from you. Because our industry, and if you make any money, is considered bad by too many people. Success used to be good, now it's bad. It's somebody to dump on. It reminds me of the story of this U.S. senator, and he dies and goes to heaven. St. Peter meets him at the door and says, you know, Senator, we don't get many of your kind up here. You know, it's good to have you. And he says, you know, St. Peter, it's really good to be here. You know, all my life I've wanted to go to heaven. It's just, you know, something I've dreamt at since I was a kid. And he says, well, we want you to do something, Senator. We want you to spend 24 hours in heaven, and then we want you to spend 24 hours in hell, and then you come back and tell us what you want to do. And he says, you know, St. Peter, I've already made my mind up. I want to go to heaven. He said, well, somebody higher up already made the decision, Senator. So there's the elevator. You push the up button, and I'll see you in 24 hours. So Senator goes and pushes the up button, goes up to heaven, comes down the next day, and St. Peter says, what do you think? And he says, that's amazing, those angels playing harps on clouds, that heavenly choir. I never heard music like that in my entire life. And those streets were actually paved with gold. I mean, we couldn't make them that level, but they're paved with gold. He said, in the mansions, just everything I read in the Bible is true. And he says, well, glad you liked it, Senator. Now go push the down button. He says, St. Peter, I've already made my mind up. He said, no, Senator, this decision comes from far up above me. You need to go do it. So he pushes the down button. The door opens up, and there's this beautiful golf course. And he sees people golfing. He hears music coming from the clubhouse over there, and he sees all his friends partying. He goes over there, and they're having steak and lobster and caviar, and the Rolling Stones are playing. I mean, it's a good day. They're just, everybody's buying him drinks and bringing him food. And he sees this good-looking guy in the corner in a tux, and he walks over, and he says, well, I'm Senator Mitchell. He says, well, I'm the devil. He says, you're the devil? He says, you're clean cut, you're good looking. Is this your party? He says, yeah, we do this all the time. He said, that's absolutely amazing. And he's just partying away and dancing, and all of a sudden 24 hours is up, and they're patting him on the back and hugging him, and said, Senator, it's just really good to see you again. He said, I haven't seen some of you in years. This has been a great day. So he goes back to the elevator, pushes the up button. St. Peter's waiting for him. St. Peter says, well, Senator, what do you think? He said, that heaven's a really good place. I never thought I'd say it, but, I saw my friends I've known for years, some I've missed. We had a party. That devil's nothing like the Bible portrayed him to be. He's a really kind of a cool guy. He said, I never thought I'd say it, but I think I'd be better off in hell. He said, Senator, I'm just sad to hear that, but there's the elevator, and just have a great eternity. And goes over, and he's smiling, pushes the down button. The door opens, and there's this barren wasteland. And people dressed in rags, carrying black paper bags, picking up trash and putting it in it. And every time they pick up, some more falls from down. He said, thinking, what happened? He looks over to the clubhouse. There's an old shack. He walks over, and there's this girly-looking guy with this long beard and looked mean. He says, who are you? And he says, well, I'm the devil. He says, I met the devil yesterday. He says, yeah, you did. He said, you had a good time, didn't you, Senator? He says, yeah. He says, well, the clubhouse is gone. He says, yes. Well, where are the Rolling Stones at? They're gone too. He says, all my friends, they're working. He said, well, what happened? He said, well, yesterday we were campaigning. Today you voted. Now, what I'm telling you is you're going to hear some real sweet stories out there. And some politicians are going to really tell you some great stuff about how you guys are doing and how they want to support you. Start checking the voting record. And when they vote against you, gals go buy a new pair of shoes, or husbands take the gal out for a weekend and have a great time. Enjoy your life, buy something for the kids, but quit paying the enemy and start holding them accountable. God bless you. Thank you for having me.